year, like a calendar year, is kind of woven in the church. We call it the liturgical year. It begins anew next week with Advent, as we look to God coming, as if people several thousand years ago waiting for God to come. And then Jesus comes. And then he lives. And then we hit Lent, where he suffers, dies. But then he rises from the dead. And then he ascends into heaven. And then we're in a period of ordinary time, which we're coming to the end of. And it kind of mirrors our own life, about how many years of our life are just ordinary. But one day we will come to the end of our life. We will face the end of times. We will face judgment and whatnot. And Christ reigns on his throne to mercifully welcome us into heaven. And so this feast is meant to be a triumphant feast of Christ, the King, reigning over all creation. The invisible God who created all things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, the one who holds all things together, Christ the King. Yet interestingly, the gospel that we're given today is Jesus on the cross. So here's our King, triumphant. And how do we see him? Suffering. What does that mean for us? What does God want to say to us today? The first thing we notice here is that here is God. God is perfect. And yet, as he does this plan that leads to him suffering, something seems missing. Like, this is why is this happening this way? If he's the triumphant king, why is he allowing himself to suffer? And I think we can connect with that, because here you and I are, and we're saying, okay, if God's a good God, then he wants good things for me. But then how come things in my life are not going so well? If God exists, if he is good, then how come this bad stuff is happening? And we could look to all sorts of different things, globally, nationally, but I think more importantly in our own lives. We could look at school, we could look at relationships, we could look at our family. We're going home for Thanksgiving maybe, and maybe it's not as perfect as we'd like it to be. And so we look at our own lives and we say, something's off, something's falling short. That if there is a good God, he's not doing everything he should do. And so these people, they're looking at Jesus and they're jeering him. They're saying, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. That Jesus, God, offering himself completely is not enough. And you and I, when we look at our lives and we see the deficiency of it, we also can see there's something missing. Something's not enough. And maybe part of it is, I'm not enough. Our Newman Night speaker this week, this religious sister, she was sharing how, as she kind of walked her vocation, she had her best friend who was walking, and her friend was convinced. She said, I'm called to marriage. So she went through college, and she's like, I'm called to marriage. But the only problem was, there's no guy. She starts working after college. I'm called to marriage, but there's no guy. And I can't help but think of how many college students I've spoken to who discerned and said, I'm called to marriage. And what makes me so mad at God is, where's the guy? Where's the girl? What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong that it's not happening the way I want it to happen? that I feel like I'm not enough, that everything I'm doing must somehow not be enough because it's not bringing about good things. Or rather, if what we're sensing is what Jesus is experiencing, that perhaps what we're doing and experiencing is exactly what needs to happen. That feeling of deficiency is exactly as it should be. This girl went on, and she went on a mission, still nothing, came back, worked, and finally in her late 30s, she met somebody. And now she's happily married, and she looks back, and she says, even though it took 20 years or whatever, it was worth it. And so in our own lives, when we're in the midst of the difficulty, when all we feel and we question is, what am I doing wrong? To have that hope and trust that God, who holds all things in his power, God who's working everything as part of his plan, that perhaps this suffering, perhaps this difficulty, perhaps the cross is necessary to get to the resurrection. Does that make sense? So the deficiency we feel, it doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. If we're going to pray and we're like, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not no angels have appeared to me. That was Mary. That's not us. It doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. That somehow it's part of God's plan. And so what do we do next? Well, okay, let's stay tuned. Okay, what happens next? Is it these two, Jesus turns to these, the two criminals there. And they're kind of, they're up there, and they're discussing this. And the one criminal, he looks to Jesus, and he's he sees the suffering he's going through. And you can almost hear him, even screaming out to God, saying, make this suffering stop. Probably every one of us have prayed that prayer at some point in our life when we're going through difficulty, whether it was heartbreak or physical illness or dealing with the loss of a friend. And we want more. We would give anything in that moment to just have the pain stop. But the other criminal, he turns to Jesus and he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That he recognizes that cross, that difficulty, that suffering, well, it's there. And if Jesus is there, and if the cross is necessary, then somehow through the cross, there must be something better. And so rather than wanting to be taken down, he says, Jesus, take me up. That he embraces the difficulty that's come to him. I think the only way we can do that, it's natural to want to separate from suffering. The Catholic Church does not teach that we're meant to suffer. What the Catholic Church teaches is Jesus crucified. And if that's the path he took, then perhaps he's trying to show us the path we need to take. Not that we bring that upon ourselves, but only through my purification, only through perhaps suffering, can I be changed to become that perfect me. And so we have a choice every time we face difficulty. We can be honest with God and say, God, I really wish this would be taken away. What does Jesus say in the garden? For me, this is the key. Jesus says, take this cup from me, but not what I will, what you will. And so when we're dealing with family the next few days, and it's I wish my family were different, but not what I will, but you will. I wish this heartbreak I'm going through, I wish this project I have to do, I wish this hurt relationship wasn't there, but not what I will, what you will. That if this is what you want, God, then somehow give me the grace to embrace it so that through this I can experience something better. That's what Jesus offers. He offers something better. On Thursday, I went with a bunch of guys, New Harkins Theater opening. We went and saw Hacksaw Ridge. A little gory if you can see it, just so you know. But in this movie, the premise is, if you don't know, there's a soldier who joins the army, and he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and he says, I'm not going to use a gun, and I'm not going to work on Saturday. And so he stays true to his beliefs, and he receives a lot of persecution from the people around him. They don't understand him. But in the main scene, when they get to this battle of Hacksaw Ridge, and they go up this cliff, and they're battling the enemy, and they make some headway, but then the enemy surges back, and everybody kind of goes running back down the cliff, except for this guy, the main character. And he chooses to stay on top of the cliff, because up there are all these other soldiers who are injured. And he, the medic, stays up there where the enemy is kind of going through and taking care of business. That he kind of sneaks around and he finds the guys who are still alive. He bandages them up and he kind of drags them to the edge and kind of lowers them with a rope. And so all night, with the enemy kind of doing, sweeping around, he's sneaking around, risking his life. Because he knows that his brothers are suffering on that ridge. And this man is good. And he wants to do whatever he can to help them, even if he has to suffer himself. How much more so Jesus, seeing us suffer, chooses to enter into our suffering so that we would know that we're not alone. And by us turning to him, giving it to him, saying, Jesus, I can't do this. You have to do this for me. That with him as our guide, as our help, that he allows us to take that and to be transformed so that we can then share in his resurrection. That Jesus, the King of the universe, the impassible one, the one who's unable to suffer, in his goodness lowers himself, because that's where you and I are. Don't we wish we could just go through college and not have any difficulties at all? But God loves us so much that he will not let us flounder. But he desires that in his mightiness and in his love, that he would come to us to lift us up, to take us to paradise. That's why I'm Catholic. I'm not Catholic because it makes my life easy. But I'm Catholic because I know that I'm not alone. And that God comes to enter into, not just he's not going to change the circumstances. He chooses not to. He respects me too much. But instead, he desires to give me the grace to change me from within so that I can experience his resurrection within me and so that I can experience his new life and freedom, and I can already begin to experience his kingdom here on earth.